question we're going to be looking at was inspired by a mid-year review that I did recently. And so for those of you watching live or watching more or less when this is recorded, it is the end of August. We're just about to start in September, which for people in the United States is the beginning of the back to school season, or it kind of already started the back to school season. But there's this kind of energy moving towards going back to school, starting up either, if you're an elementary student or a high school student, you're going back to school and you have your 9 months or so. I guess it's not 8 or 9 months of school. And if you're a university student, you'll probably be starting soon as well. So people have this kind of energy about kind of starting new, moving towards their goals. And so people start thinking about what they want for the rest of the year until we get to December, which is the holidays, and then January for the new year. So I was doing what we call a mid-year review. Let's give a little more context because, we have a calendar year. And so usually by mid-year, you're kind of evaluating whether or not your goals are helping you move towards what you actually want in your life or what you like or your intentions for what's going to happen by the end of the year. So I did a mid-year review and I found this question and I decided I was going to bring it to you guys, which is what would you like to do or what would you like to accomplish? What would you like to feel? What would you like to achieve by the end of the year? So I want to talk a little bit about why this question is important, both in personal situations, because obviously this was me asking myself the questions, and more serious situations where you may be asked a similar question in maybe a professional environment or an academic environment, or even having a more serious conversation with friends or family. So when somebody asks you, what would you like to do or feel or accomplish or achieve by the end of the year, they kind of are encouraging you to share your goals so that you're accountable, so that you can be able to have somebody who's cheering you on, who's a cheerleader, who's excited about helping you achieve your goals, or just because it's often helpful if we want something to tell somebody that this is what we want, because when we actually make effort towards sharing our goals, it helps us move towards our goals. And obviously, I understand Americans tend to be a little more goal-oriented. That's a good expression, goal-oriented, than people in other parts of the world. But it's still a really important question to be able to understand, because chances are you guys have some goals either about your English or your school, your professional life, your personal life, your hobbies, your routines. It doesn't matter. You probably have some goals in mind or even intentions, things that you want to move forward towards. And so I'd love to talk about that in today's live lesson. What would you like to do, accomplish, achieve, feel, experience by the end of the year? The thing that I want to also keep in mind when we're thinking about the end of the year, here in 2017, we've got 4 more months at the end until the end of the year. So you don't want to have this giant goal of, I want to earn $1 million by the end of the year. Maybe that is achievable, but for most of us, it doesn't seem that possible. So you might want to have something a little smaller, but it can also help you make sure that if you haven't made enough progress towards your goals, that you're thinking about what it is you actually want to achieve by the end of the year. So you're thinking about what steps can you take to achieve this goal by the end of the year? What are the things that you haven't made as much progress on that you'd like to start putting more energy into achieving by the end of the year? So I hope this is getting you thinking a little bit about goals. The other thing I did mention is that I said that Americans tend to be more goal-oriented. And for some reason, it's hard for me to say that, goal-oriented. I would link those two words together. So Americans tend to be goal-oriented. We always are talking about projects and plans and making lists of things we need to do in order to achieve things. And this is both a good thing and a bad thing about American culture, depending on your perspective. But because this is so much a part of American culture, you're definitely going to run into situations where people are going to ask you, what do you want to achieve by the end of the year? What do you want to achieve in the next 3 months? What do you want to achieve, in the next 2 years? People are always making projections into the future and starting to plan what's their target. Now, your target or your objective doesn't have to be something that you actually achieve. It's moving you in that direction towards your goal. And for something like language learning, setting goals is absolutely essential to really, really achieving your goals. So you have to have some sort of plan in mind for what you want to achieve in order to actually make progress towards doing that. If you like what I'm saying about making goals for your language learning, I have a number of videos where I talk about this concept. One is called How to Find Focus and Improve Your English More Quickly. That's one of my favorite videos, and I always recommend it because it suggests making quarterly goals. So for 3 months, instead of focusing on what's your goal for your entire life of learning English. I also have one which is Start Simple, Learn to Crawl Before You Walk, which helps you think about simple goals that are more achievable. And I have another one too. I can't think of the other one right now, but I know I've talked about it recently, and I also talked about it recently in the interview I did with Kevin of Feel Good English. So definitely there are more resources to help you. Let's talk a little bit more about setting goals. So I'm going to give you guys who are here live a chance to be able to talk a little bit about what you want to achieve, and we can talk about what do you want to do or achieve in English by the end of the year. And it can, or you can share something from your personal life. I have some goals that are kind of like not very important to somebody from the outside, but that are important for me. I'm trying to clear out old paperwork and old clothes and things that I've collected over the past 10 years or so that haven't been cleared out. Many of you know I've moved a lot in the past decade or so, and so I've gotten rid of a lot of things, but I also have stuff that was in storage that I'm trying to clear out. And that's a goal by the end of the year because I want to start off 2018 feeling great. That's another thing that I also talk about in terms of goal setting is thinking about like, how do you want to start the next year? Like right now we're in 2017 and I don't like to rush the year. Like let's still enjoy it while it's still here. But you can think about, if 2017's been a hard year, what can you do now in order to achieve the thing that you want to achieve by 2018? So something I talk about a lot because I teach accent reduction is I'm working on creating a program that will help people achieve their goals on reducing their accent by the end of 2017 so that 2018 they can feel more confident and achieve their goals. So that's something I'm doing. So that's on my goal list for helping you guys. I have a lot of cool videos that I've already recorded or planned that are coming up. So I kind of want to make sure I get all of those things done. So in terms of learning your English, like I said, if you check out that video on how to find focus, you can think more about how, what you want to do in 3 months and really set a more narrow goal so that you're more likely to achieve it. So I'd love to hear from you guys what kind of goals you want to achieve by the end of the year. Or some of you I know have been, depending on the calendar and what part of the world you're in, you may be trying to get into a university program or trying to switch jobs or something. So obviously when we set goals, we don't know necessarily if they're going to come true, but we're just putting our energy towards achieving those goals. So I'd love to hear how that's going for you guys. This is a good point. You might have this one, we call it an overarching goal, a goal that's your plan somewhere in the future, but but in order to achieve these big goals, such as when people say they want to be fluent in English, I'm always like, yeah, like in what? Like, what do you mean by that? And it's because you have to narrow the goal more in order to make it steps and things you can actually do to achieve it. So I want you guys to think about that. Like, how can you move towards your goal in like a more manageable way by the end of the year? It will take years to achieve some of these goals. Like you have to go to school. So what do you want to do by the end of the year? What's your plan for the end of the year? That's cool. This is great, Trang. So thank you for clarifying. And just to help you, it's good that you know when we talk about long-term goals and short-term goals. Let me type this in the chat box right now. Long-term goals and short-term goals. So that will be something that you can think about a little bit. Long-term goals and short-term goals will help you be able to break things down into bigger steps. This is not a goal-setting class. This is just to talk about, just kind of talk about something a little bit different that really I felt inspired by to help me think about what steps I've made towards my goals. What do you want to do by the end of the year? And something I did talk about as well, in addition to talking about what do you want to do, and this is why I put in the image at the beginning of the video, I put it in brackets because it's what do you want to do, what do you want to achieve, what do you want to accomplish, and sometimes those kind of words can be very like forceful. But it might be something like, what do you want to feel? What would you like? Because would you like is a little more aspirational. What would you like to feel by the end of the year? How would you like to feel by the end of the year? Maybe you're exercising a lot, you're training for some sort of event, or you just want to increase your flexibility. I did yoga in order to be more flexible today. And so maybe you want to achieve something like that. It doesn't always have to be like work and school and money, right? Although those things are wonderful, you can also want to achieve things about how you feel. Maybe how you feel physically, like you want to feel stronger, you want to feel more energized, you want to feel like you can, you know, ride your bike for 50 miles every day. It just depends on you. Or it could be something like you want to feel mentally, you want to feel relaxed, you want to feel calm, you want to feel satisfied with your life, you want to feel happy about things, you want to feel excited about what's happening in 2018. So you can also talk about your feelings. And a lot of, some of the goals I have on my, my goal list when I set goals are things like, to like finish a certain project. Like I said, it's to go through paperwork and just get rid of extra paperwork. It can be things that are really simple. And that's something I really want to encourage you guys to remember, is that sometimes the big goals, they're great and they're motivational, kind of in our long-term vision, but sometimes shorter, smaller goals, they're more achievable. And when you sort of build that achievement, you're going to feel more successful. So I realized when I was doing my own evaluation of where I am, it was supposed to be mid-year, but it was at the end of August, I realized that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to achieve things at a faster rate than I was doing it. So sometimes when you check in with yourself right now, before we get to the end of the year, you can kind of reevaluate and put less pressure on yourself and just understand that some of these bigger goals take time and you have to be patient, you have to do things right. So that's kind of some of my goals. And Santiago says, in my case, I'd like to improve my English more and more, becoming really fluent and good at English, because I'm not going to stop traveling every year. So that's a good chance to keep improving. Absolutely. Anything you can do to make these goals a reality. Obviously, I know not everybody has the opportunity to travel to an English-speaking country, but it's great if your goal is to someday travel, as long as you stay motivated thinking about, I'm going to feel more confident speaking English with these native speakers when I do eventually meet them. It's going to keep you motivated towards achieving that goal. And when you do have the opportunity to travel, or you meet travelers in your country, or you work with people who are native speakers, even sometimes people are on call centers and they have to call native speakers. All of these things are going to help you become fluent and good at English, because they're realistic things that you can imagine happening. A lot of times when we think of English as like just this language, like I've worked with so many people who are only learning English because they're told they have to for school or for work, and they never really achieve their goals. But the people who have an internal reason to learn English, whether they like the culture, they want to watch, Game of Thrones or some of their favorite movies in English without subtitles, or they want to, I don't know, it could be anything. Listen to music, listen to somebody like me and not feel overwhelmed. Like, you need some reason. And as an person who teaches accent reduction in addition to conversation, a lot of times when people really don't want to achieve their accent for any reason, it's harder to do that. People say, I want better pronunciation. Well, why? Right? It really does help to know why. So I love that Santiago gave specific reasons to improve his English. You guys, some information about how you can think about, what do you want to achieve by the end of the year? What do you want to do by the end of the year? Who do you want to feel like by the end of the year? And I think it's just a really good reminder that it's never too late to reevaluate, or we say course correct, when you realize you're going off to the wrong direction and you want to get back on track. So when I did my mid-year evaluation last week, I kind of realized, I'm like, okay, so some things I've achieved these things. And that's a really good, important thing to recognize too. Like, what have you already achieved? And for a lot of you guys, that's something you can think about in terms of, your English. Like, a lot of people have left me comments and said, since I started listening to you and other native speakers speaking naturally, my listening has really achieved. That's when you need to celebrate. So you can also share something you've achieved this year so far, and then what do you want to achieve by the end of the year. So it's important to celebrate the good things in addition to the things you still want to do. So when I did my list, it was things like, kind of your feelings, your things you wanted to accomplish, professional things, personal things. And I realized some of those things I've accomplished or even done better than I expected. Things I was like, I'm going to do yoga a few times a week. I do yoga every day. So it's you can kind of celebrate those good things. And then, if you realize, I haven't put enough energy into to, for me, I love, despite the fact that it looks like I'm in a forest with all the trees here, I don't spend enough time in nature. So I realized last week I want to spend more time in nature now that it's fall and be able to really get some time outside. So I have to like readjust what my plan is by the end of the year. So now I want to ride my bike more often and maybe go on some hikes. So I'm going to include that, make an effort to do that more. There's all kinds of little ways you can adjust your thinking in order to achieve your goals. And just to refer this back to English and to refer this back to other goals in terms of your professional career, you may have a goal, you want to improve your listening. So what can you do? You can start following one podcast, it has 2 co-hosts, and you get used to the way that those people talk, and that can be your goal by the end of the year. And instead of just saying, I want to improve my understanding in English, think about, I want to understand these 2 podcasts, or this one TV show, or this movie that I'm going to watch 5 minutes of every day so that I can really understand it. So you can make it something that's achievable by the end of the year. It doesn't have to be this good thing. These small goals expand beyond what we think about. In terms of, like I said, this question people could ask you at some sort of meeting. I'm trying to make sure this question's applicable to all kinds of situations. But someone could potentially ask you, what are you going to do by the end of the year? Because they want to have a plan that when you start to, by this point, businesses tend to plan like years in advance, but you might need to course correct. Like, we need to have this product ready by the end of the year. What are you going to do to achieve that by the end of the year? And for those of you who are looking for jobs, that's something you can also think about when people ask you, like, what's your short-term goals and your long-term goals. So you want to think about what's something you want to achieve right now in this new position, and what's something that's a little further off. And that's really important, because being able to talk about things that are close and things that are far will help you interact in English-speaking cultures where we tend to be very goal-oriented. So I hope that's helpful to you guys. I love, if you think about this afterwards, to leave a comment below the video in order to share what you would like to do, achieve, feel, be by the end of the year. And remember, it's okay. You can have short-term goals that are more achievable and long-term goals that you will move forward towards in the future. I just want to remind you guys that you can get your guide to more confident small talk, and it's about an 8-page guide, and you can get it here at englishwithkim.com, small talk guide. And then you'll be able to get all of the resources I'm going to be sharing and the insights that you get behind the scenes in email. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this live lesson. Thank you for those of you who participated and shared their goals and started focusing on exactly what you want to feel, do, achieve, accomplish by the end of the year. I tend to use the word accomplish in that situation. What would you like to accomplish by the end of the year? I often write on my to-do list things to accomplish, because it helps me feel a little more motivated to work towards those particular goals. So thank you guys once again. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to share it with a friend if you found it helpful. I will include the links to the other videos I mentioned below the video so that you can check them out and get some more feedback on my suggestions for goal setting in speaking English. Thank you guys so much for showing up live. If you're watching the replay, I hope it was helpful for you. And that's about it. Once again, I'm Kim from EnglishWithKim.com. I'm your guide to the essential conversation skills you need to sound more natural in English. Have a good one. Goodbye.